Welcome. Today we have two very special guests, Luka Symons and Tracey Reed. Hi, welcome ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Super
right on.
fun.
So many folks may know you individually in the community, your work in the field, the realm of nutrition, in particular through CSNN, Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, as well as being instructors around here throughout the time. Yeah, at Light Cellar. Yeah. So we are here to kind of showcase a very special project that these two ladies came together on, and it is called Histamine Haven, a brand new cookbook. I mean, it goes beyond just being a cookbook. Yeah. It is a self-discovery guide. It is amazing. So the essential guide and cookbook to histamine and mast cell activation. If you know what that is, you're in the right place. And if you don't know what that is, you're about to
also
learn.
In the right place.
Also in the right place. Yeah.
And may we open the rabbit door for you.
For sure.
Yeah.
So this is an incredible resource, first of its kind.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for mast cell,
Yeah.
And very needed in today's world. So maybe let's start there. What inspired you to put this together?
You start.
Okay, so I think what Luka and I both share is that histamine issues are a part of both of our journeys. And I started exploring this after seeing clients who were struggling with histamine issues, and they had a diagnosis of something called mast cell activation syndrome. That is sometimes shortened to MCAS, so that's an acronym that's used. And that, as Luka has suggested, there's that little rabbit hole that you go down for.
It's not very little.
It's a big rabbit hole,
for research. And I'm a bit of a research geek. And I'm also, not only am I a clinical practitioner, but I'm an educator. So in order to educate, I have to really understand these things in a way that I can also explain them to people.
Yeah.
So I was doing lots and lots of research, and I'll let Luka share her story, but we were kind of starting to know about each other in the field of nutrition, and we were here at the Light Cellar.
Oh.
You don't know this story? I don't think you know this story.
Okay.
So we decided to write this book at an event that you held. Held, and I think it was
a networking.
It was a networking event.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing.
So we've been doing our little networking thing, and I went up to Luka and I said, Luka, do you want to write a book together?
And I was
very
caught
forward
in the
of you.
moment. It was very forward. And I was there like, write a book? Luka, say no. Don't write a book. That's a lot of work. You are essentially lazy. Okay, I'm not really actually lazy. But I thought, but it's Tracey Reed. Like, say yes to Tracey. So I said yes. And then, it took off from there.
Amazing.
And, we both come at it from different points of view. I didn't realize so many of my clients actually had histamine issues.
Right.
And I didn't know it was a thing. And I didn't understand it until I had to figure it out for myself. And it was one of those, I was at a cooking conference, or a weekend cooking for the GAPS protocol.
Yeah.
Down in Colorado, and somebody at the event said, oh, it sounds like you have histamine issues. And it was the first time I heard the word. I'd already graduated from CSNN. I had gone down the rabbit hole of the gut health piece and all these other things, and was doing all the right things, big quotation marks, and wrecked a few pairs of pants in the interim because I have histamine issues, as it turns out. And so when somebody said to me, you have histamine issues, I thought, what? Let us go down the rabbit hole. And rabbit hole it was, and it was a rabbit cave, actually.
Right.
And so when Tracey said, do you want to write a book? I thought, well, actually this is going to be really good for me, because I'm like Tracey, like if I have somebody who has an issue, I'm going to research the pants off of everything going on in order to understand what's happening and figure out how to put pieces in place. So I thought, this is going to benefit my clients and me, of course. But because I had already started to figure out the histamine piece, I thought, yes, of course I will. Like, it was very obvious to me. And so then we said yes.
Cool.
And there's one thing I want to pull out of Luka's story. So she talked about the gut health piece, and she and I shared this experience on our journeys, where we were doing GAPS specifically. And so GAPS really emphasizes meat stock, bone broth, and a lot of fermented foods.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the fermented foods that were kind of the red flag. So I was doing them all. I was doing, yogurt and kefir and kvass and culturing like any vegetable you could possibly culture. And I was developing new symptoms that were not pleasant. I was developing nerve tingling down one of my legs and urinary urgency, which for those of you who aren't familiar, that's when you almost pee your pants because you have to pee so urgently. And so I was pretty embarrassed to talk about that at the time. Now I talk about it a lot because I need people to recognize that this is one of the potential symptoms. And for Luka, it was the bone broth.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah. And so for me, it was a bit more gradual. Luka's was like a fairly abrupt explosion.
Yeah. So there's urinary urgency and there's bowel urgency.
Yeah.
And I don't know if urgency covers it. Yeah.
But nobody. It's interesting. Low histamine diet, and our protocol goes kind of beyond low histamine for a variety of reasons. But a low histamine diet has been around for decades.
Right.
So part of me is like, why is nobody really talking about this? Why is this not been popularized the same way that like an autoimmune protocol or sort of, gut protocols have been? And it just feels like it's this big missing gap, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So with the urinary urgency, it took me about a year to actually figure out it's fermented foods, because it wasn't like I'd have sauerkraut and then right away would have to urinate. Like it wasn't that kind of sudden connection. So it was like, where like a few months in, I'd kind of be like, on the days I'm eating a lot of yogurt, that's when I notice like I'm rushing to the bathroom and not quite making it. So, and then, not having like heard very much about histamine, I had heard it in the GAPS community a little bit, but it was a long time figuring. I don't want other people to have to go through the same struggles that I did. So that's part of why we're getting out there, trying to educate people, and part of why the book is out.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. And I know as holistic nutritionists, if I may call you that.
Yes.
I know there's different terms and terminologies that could be used, but I mean, that is what it is. You will often be a last resort for people, right? They've been to the medical doctor, they've been this path, they're trying to figure it out themselves. And it's like, I know from teaching fermentation classes, I always say like 9 times out of 10, like just add in live culture ferments and your health will improve. But there are those individuals. It just doesn't, something kind of goes wrong, goes sideways. And so often refer them to you guys.
Yeah, and what you just said, like I quite literally in my client base see people who have been to not just a family doctor, but to all kinds of specialists.
Right, yeah.
I had a woman recently who reached out to me. She said, Tracey, I've seen 6 different naturopathic doctors and nobody's been able to help.
Right.
I hope you're the person who can help. So this is so under-recognized in the medical community, also in the naturopathic community. And it's, people are medically gaslighted.
Right.
Because they're being told, like, there's nothing wrong with you, right? A doctor will run a whole panel of blood work and say, you know what, everything's fine. Like, this is all in your head. So it's an issue that really needs to be brought to the forefront.
Yeah.
So if it's possible, right, somebody might be watching and just like, oh my gosh, that's me. I've been down every path. I'm trying to figure things out. I don't have any clear answers. Are there any sort of indications that someone could go, oh, maybe that's what it is? Okay.
For sure. So there's very quintessential things that we've talked about that we see in our clientele that's very common amongst them. First of all, it's people who really want to get answers and want to know what's going on and will keep digging.
Yeah.
And they are not happy with that. No, you're fine. And they're like, no, I'm not fine. So they know. Secondly, it's people who tend to be sensitive to a lot of things. So if you're the person who walks down the aisle at the grocery store where the soaps are, the laundry detergent, and you're the person who's like, oh my God, it's going to take me 6 hours, I'm going to vomit, it's going to be awful.
Yeah.
So if you're the person who reacts to scents, if you're the person who reacts to pressure changes, so here in Calgary we have Chinooks, and Chinooks can really do a number. You hear about, oh my gosh, I had a migraine because of the Chinook. Well, hi. mast cell.
Right.
Just for you to know, perhaps there's a mast cell component. A person who is sensitive to sound, to noise, to sense, to lights, to
electromagnetic fields.
EMFs and things with the Wi-Fi and that sort of type of thing. Or if you're the person who's sensitive to supplements or to other things where, your practitioner may say, I want you to start taking these herbals. Then you go away and you try them, and then they do not work the way that the herbalist thinks. So this is also part of our work is in helping educate, I suppose, or help turn on the light for those people who are practitioners to say, okay, when you have someone like, for example, so for me, any kind of manual therapy used to make my symptoms even worse, and the pain would just skyrocket. So, we've done a few talks at clinics where there's manual therapy and physiotherapy and those types of practices.
Osteopathy. Yeah.
And we say, okay, so if you have clients who don't react the way you think, or if they come in and they're guaranteeing you they're doing their exercises, but their situation's not improving, that's an invitation to dig a bit deeper and see if there's some mast cell involvement there or histamine. Diagnosis aside, that's an indicator. So the sensitive to all kinds of different things, from things you can touch and feel and see and smell to the way that your body reacts to things is for sure.
And I think the other thing that I would add is for some people, not everybody, but for some people they exhibit very classic allergic types of symptoms. So they might get rashes or swelling and itching where they can't piece it together to what the trigger is.
Yeah.
And they might go to their doctor and get referred to allergy testing, and that testing will either come back with nothing, like you're not allergic to anything. Sometimes it also comes back with you're allergic to everything.
Right.
And that's not actually the case. You're not allergic to everything, but your mast cells, again, Luke has been talking about being sensitive, your mast cells are just sensitized. And so they overreact to that.
The way that I like to explain that is that mast cells, for somebody who doesn't have mast cell activation or doesn't have sensitized mast cells, they need this much stimulus to get the mast cell to go pit with histamine.
Right.
That's the sound it makes. It's the mast cells. They're part of your immune system and they release histamine. So somebody who's not sensitive needs this much stimulus.
Right.
The person who has mast cell activation of some sort or who is quite sensitive needs this much stimulus. And so it's this constant release. And part of what adds insult to injury, I'm sorry to be such a bearer of bad news, but the histamine being released triggers the mast cell next door to then release more histamine. So it's kind of this boom, 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 boom. Yeah. Like it's a steady release.
And then in addition, so we call ourselves Histamine Haven because histamine is the most researched chemical mediator that is released from mast cells. But there's actually over 1,000 different chemical mediators. Yeah. And so this is why, we've kind of been talking about sensitivities and allergic type symptoms, but really any symptom can show up as part of this, just to confuse the whole matter. Like everybody has different symptoms.
Yeah.
Because these cells, because they can release 1,000 different potential mediators, they're going to release different things for every different person under different situations. And those are like a little language that goes and communicates to other cells, which will result in symptoms. So it's just it's so diverse. And people think of histamine as being an allergic type of response, but it can, it's the histamine plus all of these other mediators that just, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And part of the issue too is I always use my poor neighbor Mandy. Sorry, Mandy. But I used to have migraines, and Mandy has migraines. So both may be driven by histamine, but we both may have different reasons or different triggers as to why they're showing up. So it takes a very individual approach from person to person to try to figure out what's going on behind the scenes and how can we calm your body. And that's why we call it Histamine Haven. You need to create safety because you can do all the food pieces you want, but if you're not creating a safety place, you're not going to see the results you want.
Yeah.
Sorry. I feel like I'm going against what we're about when I even just say that, but it's to be honest, you can't, you need safety.
Yeah. And we talk about that in the book, right? Obviously as nutrition practitioners, our goal is to create safety with food, but there are other ways that you need to be creating safety. So we outline some of those in the book. We wanted the book to be like the essential, like this is all the information you need in one place. So even though the book is primarily a cookbook to get people started on that dietary journey, it is also a resource to say, like, here are the other ways that you need to look at in your life and create safety within these different aspects of your life as well. So.
Yeah, cool. Well, definitely a guide. And in the beginning of the book, really kind of laying down the philosophy, the science of it. How many references here from
over 150?
Yeah, for sure.
Many hours digging into the research. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and then kind of a self-guide to navigate this, right? I'm sure you guys, part of your incentive to write this was so you don't, you can empower people to take this journey on themselves, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they've already been to 10 practitioners, and maybe they touch base with you, right? And here's a big part of that piece of
Yeah. And it is very, very much, it has to be a process of self-discovery because with mast cells, for many people, histamine content in food is a trigger, but not always. And it is with some foods and not with other foods. So for example, mushrooms tend to be high histamine. I tolerate mushrooms really, really well.
Right.
Green tea. So Luka and I have totally different responses to green tea. Like,
can't.
Yeah, she can't do it. I can't. Moringa, we're like the complete opposite. I can't. She can. Yeah. So you have to go through this process of self-discovery and like be a detective, right? Like, does this food work for me? Is it causing a flare in symptoms? Or do I feel in a calm place with this food?
Good.
So,
Yeah, and you've really kind of guided people through stages, right?
Yes.
Of like kind of the discovery, figure that out. Okay, start from here, and then you can kind of progress through, right?
Yeah, do you want to talk about our first stage?
Yes, we've got 3 stages, and it was meant to be like the first stage is that reset. So if you need oh my gosh, I'm in a flare, just go back to stage 1. And all the recipes are marked stage 1, 2, or 3. There's variations for each of the stages if you need to as well. For some like the liver, you can't have in stage 1 because it is high histamine.
No.
But this is just another point. I will come back to the stage. But for example, so liver has the right balance of nutrients you need to make one of the enzymes that breaks down histamine. So, but liver is high histamine. So you have people saying, no, you can't eat liver because it's high histamine. Okay, but wait.
Yeah.
A food is not clean or dirty, good or bad. Like, there are pieces to each that can offer something. Let's work at reducing how reactive your body is. And then let's bring that food in because, honey, you are missing those nutrients. And that's maybe one of the reasons you can't break down the histamines that are spent. Like, maybe that's part of what the issue is. Is that enzyme even working? Okay, so, excuse me, sorry, back to the issue. Stage 1 is that low histamine, and it's the lowest histamine one. We've also reduced the lectins in that first stage, and lectins are one of the compounds that are found in plant foods typically. So in, tomato skins, potato skins, but also nuts and seeds and beans and grains and legumes and all of the plant world. So lectins offer this brilliant stability to the cell walls of those plants. Well, lectins also tend to trigger mast cells to release histamine. Lectins also have a potential of driving leaky gut or pushing apart the junctions of the cells of the intestinal lining, resulting in leaky gut. So leaky gut can be one of the drivers of why you can't clear histamine. So you need to, it's not just going low histamine, it's going low histamine to reduce some of those compounds coming in, reduce the lectins as well. And at the same time, introducing the gut repair piece, which needs to be done. And then the first stage is that first stage you can come back to when you're in a flare. Stage 2, we start to develop into a little bit more like the detective phase, like Tracey was just mentioning. And that's where you start to see, are you still reacting to things? Okay, let's see. Is there salicylates? Is there oxalate issues? Sulfur is yet another compound since we wrote the book that we're realizing might be one of the contributing factors. FODMAPs can be for some people, and they won't be for everybody, but they could be. So that's where that detective piece comes in. So that's the second stage. Then the third.
And then the third stage is really, really focused on bringing in nutrient density. So again, foods that might be higher in histamine, like the liver, And we've got nutrient density throughout the whole process, but this is really focused on, okay, we know there's some foods that are high histamine, but they can address some of the contributing factors. So let's bring them in. Again, this is not like I have to bring this food in. This is I'm going to bring it in, see how my body does with it.
Yeah.
And then, if it works, great, add it in. If it doesn't, I'm going to leave it out for a little while longer and try it again later. And this, again, like it's really about the customization piece. And it's also sometimes about quantity, right? So maybe I can have a little bit of liver, a few bites, but I can't have a big liver and onion dinner, for example, right? So quantity can also play a little piece in this. Sure. And the really important thing that I think Luka and I always try to emphasize is that we want as much abundance as possible. So abundance, diversity is our ultimate goal while you manage your symptoms.
Totally. I mean, you've done a great job in terms of the number of recipes. It's beautiful, color photos, and everything from lunch, breakfast, dinners, snacks in between, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And kind of on average, how, and I'm sure you're probably going to tell me it's individual, but on average,
it's
like...
individual. I even know what you're going to ask, but I'm going to ask it, sorry.
Yeah. How long does it take to somebody to go through the stages?
So, we suggest starting with 1 to 3 months on stage 1. Yeah. And in most cases, I would say 3 months. Like, again, we're seeing people who've been through the medical system, the naturopathic. Things are pretty complex. Yeah. And so we want to make sure we get inflammation down as much as we can. 1 month is maybe not always enough to do that. So 3 months, and then slowly, that discovery stage is not a fast process, right? You want to give yourself a few days with a new food, a few bites at each meal, see how you're doing with it. And then if it doesn't sit well with you, you need a few days to kind of wash out, right? Let things settle down again. So it's not a speedy process by any means. And then
and
again,
it's always moving.
Yes. Like if stress comes into your life, then things.
That doesn't ever happen to anybody.
No. My car broke down this week. So often we find is that there are situations. Even the smoke. We've had smoke here recently, right? That can trigger things. So then you might have to go back to stage 1 for a while to just let things settle down again. So. Wellness is a journey, right? It is. There's no end. It's a journey, and you have dips and these ups and downs, and you just kind of ride them. And the goal is to ride them as best you can, and maybe have the severity of those ups and downs decrease, so they're just little ups and downs.
That's the goal, and that is the goal. That's really the goal, because this is really tricky, and I feel like we're kind of firing ourselves, but. Going low histamine doesn't fix a histamine issue, right? So that's also the other part of this. Like I have clients, and I love them, but they're like, well, I've done low histamine for 3 weeks. How come I still have symptoms? Or I've been going low histamine for a year and I still have symptoms. But we're not advancing in the other pieces to figure out what's driving the histamine issues. What are your triggers? How is your blood sugar regulation? How is your thyroid working? How's your metabolic health? How is your liver clearance? How are your kidneys clearing? How are your adrenals? Are they really stressed out? How is that stress response in the body? Is it being triggered all the time? Is there some type of low-grade inflammation that may be prodding this to happen all the time? So it's going to be different for each person. So the going low histamine is that first bit to reduce the reactivity. And then the goal, like Tracey says, is to bring in that diversity and variety, and then to work towards letting go of labels on foods and then just going for the real food, and as much as you can, bless it and get on with it.
And to use myself as an example, I've been on this journey for 4 years. And as much as I've tried to identify what all those triggers are, right? I've addressed toxicity, I've addressed mold, I've addressed birth trauma from being like a premature baby, right? I've looked at intergenerational trauma. There's so many things to explore. And while I feel my symptoms are managed, I still feel like I have a really long ways to go on this whole process to like find that place of like, we're good and steady.
But the main thing, you're on the journey, a few steps down, and you know how to manage it. Way better than you.
How different are your symptoms now than they were maybe 5 years ago?
Yeah, so many of the urinary urgency isn't an issue.
No.
Thank God.
And I had eczema on my hands for 40 years.
Wow.
And so that is largely under control.
And now I'm campaigning for her to be a hand model. Because her hands are gorgeous. Like, they're all over the book.
I was just going to ask, whose nails are those?
My nails are not so nice.
I think I recognize right there. There she is. Cool. So you mentioned learning about sulfur. Were there any other kind of, surprises, shall we say, or kind of discoveries that you made in the process of writing the book?
Don't write a book. That would be the first discovery.
True.
I don't know.
Were there good... that's a good question. Were there surprises? If there were, it's kind of rewritten now that when something shows up, I bet you that's histamine mediated. Oh, yes, it is. That's not a surprise. Like, for example, so there's a history of glaucoma in my family. And so just out of curiosity, 2 months ago maybe? And I said to Tracey, geez, I wonder if glaucoma, like, it's autoimmune. We were getting ready to do a big block on autoimmune and see how mast cells and histamine are involved in autoimmunity. And I thought, I know glaucoma is like one of the new it's just been figured out that it's an autoimmune condition. And so I just was looking it up and of course. Would you be surprised? No, I'm not.
No.
So it's one of these things where I think initially it was kind of this, and now it's, oh, of course.
Yeah, so in the book, we have a list of conditions that have been researched to have histamine or mast cell involvement.
Right.
And the list is also on our website.
Yeah.
It is much longer than what was in the book.
Right.
So the research right now into mast cells is really exploding. And so we just keep digging and coming up with more and more conditions. So that for sure. Mast cells, to put this into perspective, mast cells are your master immune cell.
Right.
They were the first immune cell from an evolutionary perspective. So they had to do everything.
Yeah.
So now their job is to communicate to all the other immune cells, regulate them, tell them what to do, right? They're like the boss, like, you do this, you do this. And so I don't even know where I was going to go with this story. I remember. So mast cells are naturally involved in all immune function. So it makes sense that they're going to be involved in, autoimmune conditions and, some cancers and like allergies, anywhere we look at
viruses.
Sort of immune, dysregulation. Long COVID is, they're saying now it's mast cell activation syndrome, right? It's one and the same. So it makes sense that mast cells are involved in all of these things. So then the question is, like, do you just have a normal mast cell involvement in whatever's going on in your body? Because they will be involved in anything.
Yeah.
Or do you have a heightened, more activated type of response? So that, I think, is really important for just really anybody with chronic, complex health issues to ask.
Yeah, cool.
It's fun.
Okay, well, tell us about the website, because I think that's going to be like a first logical step for somebody to go. You've got a lot of resources there. So what kind of things can people find at histaminehaven.com?
You are correct. That is what it is. We like to make things easy. So histaminehaven.com. Lots of different pieces there. So you can go to the resources page and there's some free downloadables that you can just get from the website. We don't even need your email for it. Like, get started. Just get started. Start with the grocery list. The grocery list is the grocery list for that stage one. So every food that's on there is free game. Have at or eat all of those foods. If a food is not on there, it is because it has the potential of triggering mast cells or the release of histamine or driving histamine issues. Depends where you are on the spectrum of things, doesn't matter. So that list should give you a really good starting point. From there, we have an online community, which also has a little bit even more downloadables kind of thing. And that you have to register for, but it's free of charge, which is really nice. And then for those who find it tricky to follow a trail of emails that comes, then we also have an option where you can just download those right to your computer if you prefer from an email. Then we have the next very logical step is a course called the Histamine Connection.
Right.
And that is the entry point. When you're ready, so I think the book is probably the first step, but when you're ready, taking the Histamine Connection is where you make it make sense for yourself. And that's where you get to put those pieces together. We always use the analogy of like this puzzle piece, and it's like there's a puzzle, there's a piece missing.
Right.
And that's what this is. It's the histamine connection, because you realize, oh my gosh, there's like one thing that's common to all of my symptoms. So I don't need to do the gut piece, and I have migraines, and I have skin things, and I have this going on over there, and that
pain,
over there.
and pain,
and anxiety, and all these things. It's all one thing. Oh, I can play whack-a-mole with one thing. And that was the piece that was amazing for me. I couldn't believe that there was one common piece to all the symptoms I just mentioned were all my symptoms, actually.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, like, that's unreal. One thing, and then it makes it, like, it's not complicated anymore. Because this is the thing with people who have histamine or mast cell activation, you're that person. Like, I was always that person. Oh, I don't know how I'm going to do on the herbals. I don't know how I'm going to do on the supplements. Oh, I don't know how I'm going to do in the physiotherapy. Like, my physiotherapist fired me. He's like, you're not doing your exercises. I was like, I'm totally doing them. But I'm in tears. I'm in so much pain.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous, one thing after the other. That,
so
the writing on your chart.
The histamine connection is free. We have an evergreen version, or we do a monthly talk so that people can ask questions. Yeah. And if you're kind of going, oh, I wonder if this is me, that's where we go through the whole symptom profile. Yeah. So the histamine connection, again, it's on the website. It's just that, like, if you're thinking, is this me? That's
where you start.
Yeah.
And that's where you start. Don't go any deeper than that. Just start there.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And that's under courses for those who want to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's also free, P.S.
Okay.
There's a reason we call ourselves Histamine Haven.
Totally.
Like, you have to figure out some of these pieces for yourself. And part of that is creating your haven. And you can't know if we're going to be part of your safe haven unless you try it out, too. So, come on in.
Yeah.
And it's nice in here.
I want to just talk a little bit more about what Luka said, like, where all your symptoms are connected to this one sort of big contributing factor. And, working with people, like, this is profound. The difference this makes in people's lives, where suddenly they're like, wow, my anxiety is down, or like, in 1 week I've lost 10 pounds because the inflammation is coming down. Or, pain is like, we see pain, it shows up anywhere in the body with histamine stuff. It can be joint pain, it can be like the migraine, headache pain, it can be
chronic pain.
Yeah, it can be bladder pain, chest pains, like there's all kinds of, for women, PMS pain. And so that's another sort of classic symptom that can show up in many, many different ways. But it's this, like, I'm doing this one thing and I just feel so much better. It's pretty amazing.
It's a successful game of whack-a-mole.
Cool.
Woo! One whack and you got them all down at the same time. It's gentler than that, don't worry.
Okay, let's shift just a little bit. So kind of, surprises. What was it like working together, through this process? It was a journey, no doubt.
Incredible.
Amazing.
Incredible.
I can't believe she's still talking to me, is what I have to say. So working with Tracey is really easy, and I don't work very easily with others. I've always been I'll just do it myself, and I'll do in the corner and be by myself. And with Tracey, it's so fun to have somebody to bounce ideas off of. And if I show up and I'm like, oh, it's okay, I'll go do it. She's like, no, you're not. Actually, we're doing it together. Come on. And there's no hard feelings, and I don't feel terrible. And it's the first time in my life. So thank you.
Aw, sweet.
Luka and I have very different skill sets. And but surprisingly, we have a very similar vision as to like what we want, and it was never really discussed at the outset. It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just better together. We fill in each other. Yeah.
Yeah, we are better together.
Yeah.
The sum is greater than, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't know if the expression is in French.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So if you're watching this interview in time, we have an upcoming event.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we are so excited, especially given the fact that the little germination of the book started at the Light Cellar.
Yeah, how appropriate.
We're
Cool.
really, really excited that we're partnering up with you for the official launch of the book.
Yeah, it's happening June 6th. For those who are in the Calgary area, we will have a link wherever you're watching this for where you can register for the tickets. Yep, it's free. What? That's right. One day we're going to make a bit of money. It's not happening. Buy the book. That's all I have to say. But so we're doing the event here at the Light Cellar. It's open doors at 7 p.m. and then we have some treats. I want to know what you guys are cooking up because we've chatted a little bit about would you, could you?
Yeah, we will, but we'll get into that after.
It's still under wraps.
It's a secret.
So there's going to be something yummy.
Oh, totally.
That's all.
Yeah,
Well, of
lots
course,
of goodness.
it's the Light Cellar.
For sure, and a haven of community, right?
Yes.
Most importantly, so folks will be able to connect with Luka and Tracey, in person, ask questions, get the book signed. We'll have a little kind of like meet and greet, book signing, chatting, tasting lots of samples, and try some of the recipes. This is not just boiled meat and blanched vegetables, right?
It can be,
It
but
can
it
be.
doesn't have to be.
And just to like whet your appetite a little bit, one of the things that will be on offer for sampling is our blueberry pomegranate bar.
Yeah.
All right.
Which is delicious and grain-free, and I'll let you taste it to try to guess what the bulk of that bar is made of. It's a bit of a surprise.
Cool. All right. Any kind of final last thoughts before we sign off?
Last thoughts. This kind of book does not happen but in our own little silos sitting in the back corner. So this book is truly a community thing. There's an acknowledgement section at the end, and we have name checked everyone that we could think of, from the people who did the research in the first place to bring to light that there's histamine, to the current researchers who are at the forefront of some of this stuff in the States, to name checking some people on the Canadian scene, Janice Joneja, who's done a lot of research on this out in Vancouver. There's also our local community. When we were putting together the book, this is completely self-funded. We self-published. So we don't have a company saying, here's $10,000, go write a book. Like, that would be nice. Yeah. But it didn't happen. So this was all from our pocket, and we very humblingly approached the Light Cellar, Amaranth Foods in town, and a few other, Shirley's Greenhouse was another, Red Tail Farms, like some of the local producers, and we said, please, sir, can I have some? And we were supported by so many, and it was just so, from the point of view of having an idea, to feel the support of the community that you're going to be sending people to, just felt like, let's do this.
Yeah.
Like, we're doing the right thing. We had over 70 people testing the recipes, which was a monumental task, but also super fun to hear the feedback. Oh, you should do this in the air fryer. And Tracey and I are like, I don't know about the air fryer. And then all these, I don't have an Instant Pot. Okay, we got to alter the recipe for those who don't have one. Of course.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Good idea. And so it's a community event. It is a community thing, this book. It's not just Tracey and Luka.
Yeah.
It is a community thing, and we would not be where we are if Calgary was not the way it is.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So thank you to your part in it, to the store.
Totally.
And this is truly a
Thank
community
you to
celebration.
everybody who pre-purchased the book,
Oh, yeah.
because we could not have gotten it to print without
No.
the money that
The
was coming
funds
in.
were out.
Yeah.
So thank you
and all the
for-
recipe testers, like, that's so important. Like, how many cookbooks are out there that are just like, oh, well, whoops, like, did they really triple, quadruple test that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that I've gone through it, I go through some of my recipe books. I'm like, oh, you didn't have recipe testers, did you? I could tell. I know, Do you need a project manager for your next cookbook? But yeah, it is a community affair, and we are really, really so very grateful for everyone, from our families to our local community, for the support, and to the people who are like, get on it, we need the book.
Yeah. And you know what, talking about Calgary, I mean, many cities in the world, right? The diversity that we have now, we tried to bring that into the book and reflect different cultural dishes as well. And so that like anybody could pick it up and go, oh, you know what, here's a comfort food that I've grown up with that is familiar to me. And we've just done a whole spin on it. And
no, there's no mac and cheese, sorry. Sorry. There's going to be new comfort foods, though, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, check it out, histaminehaven.com.